Which Azure service provides a unified view to manage compliance across your entire organization? A. Azure Policy. B. Azure Blueprints. C. Azure Security Center. D. Azure Compliance Manager. The correct answer is D. Azure Compliance Manager. Azure Compliance Manager provides a unified view to manage compliance across your entire organization. Azure Policy helps enforce organizational standards. Azure Blueprints helps deploy a repeatable set of Azure resources. And Azure Security Center focuses on security posture management. What is the primary purpose of Azure Policy? A. To manage billing and cost analysis. B. To enforce organizational standards and assess compliance at scale. C. To provide a centralized dashboard for monitoring security. D. To automate the deployment of Azure resources. The correct answer is B. To enforce organizational standards and assess compliance at scale. Azure Policy is designed to enforce organizational standards and assess compliance at scale. It is not used for billing, security monitoring, or resource deployment automation. You need to ensure that all resources in a subscription adhere to a specific naming convention. Which Azure tool should you use? A. Azure Monitor. B. Azure Policy. C. Azure Advisor. D. Azure Cost Management. The correct answer is B. Azure Policy. Azure Policy can enforce naming conventions across resources in a subscription. Azure Monitor is for monitoring, Azure Advisor provides best practices, and Azure Cost Management is for cost analysis. Which feature allows you to define a repeatable set of Azure resources that adhere to an organization's standards, patterns, and requirements? A. Azure Policy. B. Azure Blueprints. C. Azure Resource Manager. D. Azure Security Center. The correct answer is B. Azure Blueprints. Azure Blueprints allows you to define a repeatable set of Azure resources that adhere to an organization's standards, patterns, and requirements. Azure Policy enforces standards, Azure Resource Manager manages resources, and Azure Security Center focuses on security. A company wants to track regulatory compliance and manage risk in their Azure environment. Which tool should they use? A. Azure Policy. B. Azure Blueprints. C. Azure Security Center. D. Azure Compliance Manager. The correct answer is D. Azure Compliance Manager. Azure Compliance Manager helps track regulatory compliance and manage risk. Azure Policy enforces standards, Azure Blueprints deploys resources, and Azure Security Center manages security posture. You need to ensure that a specific resource group does not exceed a certain number of virtual machines. Which Azure feature can help you achieve this? A. Azure Policy. B. Azure Blueprints. C. Azure Resource Manager. D. Azure Cost Management. The correct answer is A. Azure Policy. Azure Policy can enforce limits on the number of resources, such as virtual machines, in a resource group. Azure Blueprints is for resource deployment, Azure Resource Manager manages resources, and Azure Cost Management is for cost analysis.